when you think about the idea of a leader, like there's got to be this connection of your uh, processing brain and your heart. Like you've got to be able to do both all the time. Like you've got to affect people in the
Hmm.
way that they think, but also in the way that they feel. And this idea of storytelling is where that happens. It's like,
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the real stories of people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You'll learn valuable lessons from their lives, lessons that you can apply to become the best leader you were created to be. When leaders are intentional, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I am an author, speaker, business owner, and love being a podcast host of the Intentional Leader Podcast. Thank you for listening. And listeners, if you could help us, hit that subscribe button, leave some comments, like it, share it. That way we can get this message out. We're grateful for our international growth, and we want to keep it trucking on that direction. So, everybody, you are in for a special treat today. Our guest is Chip Higgins. Chip is a business coach. He is an author, and he is the founder of Bizzics. Yes, you heard me say that correct. Bizzics, and you're going, what does that mean? It is a combination of business and physics, and we're going to dive into that today. Chip, welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast.
John, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, grateful to have you here with us. So, Chip, you know our show, and we start out every time with just kind of like give us a quick walk through your professional journey, but more than that, some of the leadership lessons learned along the way.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of a weird person. I started in the banking industry on purpose. Most people can't explain why, but there's something about the role of banks in the community and just kind of the work. And so I spent about 40 years in the banking industry, and
Well, you
most of
must have started when you were five or something, right?
that. Some of the early decisions I made, you might have thought that, but yeah. So I mean, in that time, I just immediately fell in love with small business owners, and that's where I spent all my time and energy, is really trying to organize myself, and then ultimately the resources of banks to help small business owners succeed. From my leadership development standpoint, that 40-year journey took me from a trainee all the way to leading a division for multiple banks.
Hmm.
And in the middle of that, a very significant investment in myself, somewhat financially, but mostly the commitment to learn leadership better, and joining the John Maxwell Team when he founded it in 2011. So I'm a founding member of the John Maxwell Team. And, I think that was a pivotal moment in really embracing the idea that leadership can be learned. And I
Yeah.
know that there are personalities that kind of lend themselves to attracting people and that type of thing. But by and large, I think that we learned so many lessons along the way. It's hard to even begin to break down in the time we have, like everything I learned along the way. But I think if there's anything that I learned, it's just a greater, just increasingly important emphasis on leadership as the way. And whether
Yeah.
you're a business owner, leading a family, leading a community organization, it's worth the investment. And please don't ever think you have all the tools that you need, because
Never.
it's a journey that never ends, and there's always something that you need to learn. So I think that for
Absolutely.
me is kind of a lifelong journey. I started Bizzics in 2019, primarily to do more for small business owners. I felt a little bit constrained by sticking to loans, deposits, and just kind of protecting people's money. And have thoroughly enjoyed bringing the message of business momentum to small business owners through the coaching, and also through my book, The Bizzics Way.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful experience.
Good. Good. And we'll dive into that. So I want to go back for a second. I know you hit really quickly, over the 40 years, the elevation in your career as far as positional. One of the things people always ask are, were you pursuing that? Were you pursuing the elevation in your career, the promotions? Did they come to you because of quality work? How'd that play out for you? And why did you choose that path that you were on?
Well, that's a good question. I think I've just been drawn to leadership for a long time. I feel
Hmm.
like even going back to high school, I was student body president, and I think there's something, for my internal being that's very electrifying about working with people and moving towards something that's important. And I think as I developed a competency in banking, that part of me really started to light up. And I kept thinking about, well, between high school, college, leadership positions, all of it, I just had this orientation to lead. And I started thinking about, well, the bank has all these resources. How can I get out ahead of it and make this matter to a lot of people? And, it's a lot of enthusiasm, excitement, but also, demonstrating competence for people. So I'd say, whether I was broadcasting that or not, I don't think that a climbing person, in other words, a guy that's sitting at the job posting board every morning trying to figure out what his next move is, but I think there was a palpable intention about the work I
Right.
was doing, and an acknowledgement that I think I was a pretty solid person. I know that, in all honesty and candor, there was a time I did want a leadership role, and I was told that I think the direct quote was, "We're looking for a heavyweight," and
Mm.
that's a chastening kind of lesson of like, as much as you want it, you have work to do, and I think it motivated me even more, to invest in
Yeah.
myself and figure out, well, how do you get to be a heavyweight? I mean, if
Yeah.
that's what it takes, and so much of it is experience, as you know. It's putting yourself out there, and even the smallest thing, if you can lead on it, I think you begin to get recognized as a person that can be trusted with resources and with people, and with their lives. So
True.
um,
True.
I
What
don't.
I
I'm
like in what you,
disappointed if somebody said that Higgins is a climber. I don't. I
yeah.
hope that's
No,
not
but
my.
what I like in that is you said over and over and over in the last 2 minutes, the people, the people, the people, the people, the people. And that's the essence of it, right? And this is where I think we mess up as leaders sometimes is we think leadership is about the position, it's about elevation, it's about the career. No, it's just about people. And when you invest in people, great things begin to take place, right? Because they're drawn to us and that's where, leadership is influence.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's what draws that out in a powerful way. And so I want to take 1 second here. Many of our listeners have probably heard of John Maxwell. Obviously, Maxwell is known globally in the leadership realm, and there's
Look.
some incredible things that he's done. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, not far from a church that he was at here way
Oh
back when he was preaching, and then I was tracking him when he was out in the San Diego area, now where he's gone. But being a founding member of the John Maxwell leadership side, the kind of the post ministries is building
yeah. Right.
up that leadership aspect. When you look at someone like Maxwell, world renowned, written tons of books, been on all the podcasts, been at all the conferences. I've not had a chance to personally meet him, but I've heard from a lot of people that have, like you. But what is it about him? Because all of the notoriety, all of the quote unquote popularity doesn't matter to him. What he's real and genuine. Talk about that for a little bit because I think that's why he's effective.
Yeah. There's something about being in an audience with John that you feel like you've known him a long time and he's your best friend. I think I talk about John a lot, and I have a big principle in my life that. It's not earth shattering. I'm sure Socrates or somebody already said this a long time ago. I'm not inventing it, but John is just one of those people that is not this difference between being simplistic and simple.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of simplistic answers in the world. There's a lot of buzzwords. I found in John's work a lot of depth in making it simple for people. The very first John Maxwell book I did was a 21-year Immutable Laws of Leadership, and
Yep.
like I knew leadership, but when I finished that, I was kind of masterminding with a mentor on it, and I finished the 21 laws. It was like this clarity about these are the levers. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, to your point earlier, we can get blinded by a position, or it's like I'm going to get into that bonus plan, or whatever it is. But when you realize, like there are very finite, tangible things that you can work on, and the way that John, first of all, simplifies that so that you understand the
Mm-hmm.
connection to the end goal of getting somewhere with people, um, but also like the investment in communication skills. And you see the work that he did in the pulpit of storytelling,
Yeah.
the power of storytelling to get people to have an emotional response to the idea. And the guy, I used to subscribe to the Maxwell Minute. I get it. I
Hmm.
used to get a CD
Yep.
a month. I couldn't wait
Or
to
cassette
his.
tapes, even, right?
I could
Yeah,
not. I couldn't wait to hear the stories that he had to tell. He's just a great storyteller.
exactly.
And that's another thing. As I progressed as a leader, I just feel like when you think about the idea of a leader, like there's got to be this connection of your uh, processing brain and your heart. Like you've got to be able to do both all the time. Like you've got to affect people in the
Hmm.
way that they think, but also in the way that they feel. And this idea of storytelling is where that happens. It's like there's definite information in a story, but
Hmm.
also a plot with rising action where you're kind of drawn in, and suddenly you can see yourself in the story. And John is the absolute master at that. I mean,
Yeah.
when I joined that team, he had multiple lanes. He had a coaching lane and a
Hmm.
speaking lane, and so there was this great speaking coach there, and he was from England, and he used to say like John's probably in the top 3 or 4 speakers that he's ever, Les Brown and John,
Yep.
and there's a handful of people that just know how to do that. And so anyway, I feel like I'm rambling on now, Sean, but I
Yeah.
mean,
No, you're good.
it's accessibility, simplicity, but not simplistic thinking, and like the ability to connect with people's hearts. I mean, it's a very powerful combination to me.
Yeah, it's the deep essence of leadership. And, the story aspect, there are masters at it, like John, like Les, and there's so many others. And I struggle with this too, Chip, in my life. Like, I was very direct. I could also make difficult things seem simple and stuff, but I didn't have that story side. I didn't have that full drive and impact side. And so I started reading about it. How do you become a better storyteller? How do you tell stories that have an impact? And in the end, what I learned, and again, it's a simple tool that's difficult to implement, is it's just our experiences, right? We think that what we went through doesn't make a difference. That lunch that I had with that guy from down the street, we don't realize there's actually a story in that. Right. And it's just like it's taking everyday moments and making a story about it. Think about the TV show Seinfeld. Seinfeld was a hit, right? And what's the definition of Seinfeld? The show about what? Nothing. It
Yeah,
was about something. It was
reenact.
about everyday life, just the story of living.
Yeah, it was like you take a tight 10 from Mrs. Maisel and then people act it out, and you get the
Yeah.
same message in a different way.
Exactly, exactly. Great stuff. Well, let's transition a little bit. I love business. I would not necessarily say that I love physics, okay? Nor am
Yeah.
I intelligent enough for physics, but I do understand some of the basic laws of physics. You, Chip, have taken this great leap of combining business and physics and come up with the Bizzics way. That's the book. We can kind of see it over your shoulder there. So, talk to us about Bizzics and some of the general principles, and let's just have a conversation through this, how it can impact our
Yeah.
listeners.
I just, give me the fist, Sean. If I'm going on too long, just, call time out, because I feel like I could talk about this all day. But, I think the very beginning of Bizzics came from personal experience. I'm not a great science person either. I'm fortunate that the momentum equation only has 2 variables. It's not
There
like
you go.
you're taking the first derivative of anything or whatever. But my experiences with business owners over the years, and even on leadership teams within banks that I worked for, there was just a common statement about momentum, and
Mhm.
of course, a desired thing, and usually coming up, when people felt like they weren't going where they wanted to go, or they didn't have enough energy. And in the market that I enjoyed serving, the small business owner, just this awareness that, there's 10,000 plus business books out there. And so if somebody's talking about momentum, what are they really talking about? Like if I go into a business owner and they say, well, we're trying to build some momentum. Like, what do they mean? And
Right.
it's such a powerful law when you think about mass times velocity. And so I just started thinking like that would be really portable, accessible idea if you could communicate it to a business owner that mass and velocity in business. What are they?
Hmm.
And so that was the origin of it. And then I started getting really motivated by it, the more I kind of reflected on what our vocabulary is in business. Uh, it's a very physical vocabulary.
It is. Absolutely.
When you think about the way business owners talk to each other, it's very high impact and physical in the language that we use. So um, the idea was just to say, look, this isn't like the top 5 ways to do social media, but it's an incredible mindset for any leader, but especially a business leader, to say, if I want momentum, kind of like, the idea of John, like, if I want momentum, here are the things that I need to check off on. And so I, knowing my limitations as a science student, I vetted it out with a really good friend of mine who's a Caltech physicist.
Mm-hmm.
Spent a lot of time together. He's very skeptical. Obviously, he lives in the physical world, but as he was talking, I had 35 or 40 years of interactions, like you're saying, like
Right.
all these things come rushing back, and
Yeah.
he would say something, and I would think to myself, man, that's exactly what happened in this situation. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I launched into the book, and really it just kind of breaks that equation apart: mass times velocity, and sometimes the terms are not what you think. And there are even things that we need to be very cognizant of every single day that aren't explicit in the formula. So, mass times velocity, we can talk about mass and velocity, but when you look at velocity, embedded in that is the idea of energy, which underlies everything. I have, when I do a talk, I have a picture of the challenge, one of the Challenger missions. And, it's a giant picture, and less than half of it is the rocket. It's
Yeah.
almost all a depiction of the energy field
Right.
around that lift. And so we have to think about how we produce energy with our entrepreneurial vision, how our cultures distribute energy, and how we find unique energy in others. Because
Mm-hmm.
our energy is never going to be enough to take it to the ultimate. We've got to find a way in every person that they find a place where it's so resonant, the work that they're doing, that they basically freelance and riff into it with their own energy fields. So it's like you're
Right.
telling them what to do. So
Right.
it's 8 chapters. It's energy, velocity, net force, mass, a big chapter on how to sustain momentum. I mean, that's a big problem. Topic of business owners. Then I've got a couple of
Yeah.
other related topics about inertia is my leadership chapter, and I've got friction and leverage in there, primarily for financial sense. But
Yeah.
there's a lot to friction and leverage in business. That friction is one of those words that people recoil, but you realize, like, I need it. I need it.
Yeah.
Need it.
Yeah.
I need good
So
friction. Level.
let's break this down a little bit. You've used a lot of those physics terms. I'm guessing our listeners are at least semi-familiar with those different pieces, but let's do some translation and trying to simplify it a little bit. So the first part of the law of momentum is the mass. So when you think about business owners, solopreneurs, leaders inside of business, what are the different realms that you identify as those mass pieces?
Yeah, and the first thing we need to understand in science is mass has almost nothing to do with size. Uh,
Hmm.
so
Yeah, we
I,
think massive, but that's not really what it is.
so we think about big things, but in science, it's density, it's weight. And my conversation with Marcus, he made a comment again. This is one that exploded in my mind, but I think he just kind of fleetingly said it. Is that if you looked at the periodic table and all
Hmm.
the elements, 98% of the mass of anything on that chart is in the nucleus. It's all how many protons, how many neutrons, how tightly are they packed. I mean, it's whatever is at the center. So if you think about any organization, you're going to have at that center, the way I view the world, number one is people. There's a founder or founders that hopefully have experience in life and experience in business. They've been tested,
Hmm.
and they have extremely strong values and character. And I think this would ring true with anybody in the investment, private equity,
Yeah.
investing. Like, you're going to look at that team of, like, is this a team I can trust with money? So this whole call to personal development, leadership development, all of it, like it's critical because you want that heaviness at the very center so that you can carry it forward. You've got your values, you've got hopefully a mission statement that just makes people's ears ring. I mean, the vision and mission are all there. And then this is what I've been on topic about a lot lately is the uniqueness of your solution to the problem that you're after. I hope that every leader in starting whatever it is, like it's not about you, it's about something in the world that you're trying to make better, change or improve. And there's a person or an entity or a system that's at the end of that you have the intention of fixing in a way that nobody else has ever thought about. And when you bring all that together, I mean, that's mass. It's like,
it is.
This all the time. It's like, a volleyball and a bowling ball are roughly the same size. The mass is completely different. And,
great illustration of it. As you're talking about that, I just think through, it's about people, right? In the end. And in some senses, that mass for like a solopreneur, they are that mass. They need to create that. For people who are leading other organizations, they are still that mass. But in business, no matter what size of business, we always have to ask ourselves, who's our customer, right? Sometimes that's an external customer, the end user, whether it be a product or a service. Sometimes that's an internal customer of how we're developing our people and leading inside of those realms. But in every situation, it's about who's the customer, but the customer is always a person, right? And even though we're in this technological age and AI is legit, we have to look at it. We have to see how we can maximize it and use it inside of our businesses. It doesn't change the fact that all of our customers in the end are people and we are a person. And that's the mass that really drives everything in business.
Yeah. And that's the final point on mass is that, if 98% of it's in the nucleus, the rest of it is about bonding. And, it's a very powerful thing when you think about the difference bonding can make. An example I use a lot is pencil, lead, and diamonds are basically the same matter. They're carbon, but the bonding is completely different. And sometimes that bonding among people, I think it can get a rap of being faddish, or that's something we don't need to worry about because we need to make sales. There's so many things. It's like it feels fluffy, but our ability to connect. I was listening to a guy yesterday at a conference, and he said this year he had a mind shift about retention and cross sell, and that he has had more revenue this year from retention cross sell than he had in new business last year.
Wow.
And that's intentional. That's the intention of being close, understanding, anticipating. And so we can't ignore that too. I mean, that's a big part of mass. And there's another part of that connection that's really important too. Going back to the energy field is like when we're really connecting. You and I both know. Anybody listening knows. Like when you're really connecting, there's palpable energy in the air. I mean, it's the difference of a mixture and a compound is the compound produces heat because there's real bonding going on, and that's how it is with human beings too. It is. Can be at a networking event, and everybody's moving around, but once you stop and have that pointed interaction with somebody, the energy changes immediately, and we need to be aware of that at all times. That energy field.
Yep, I was at a conference last week, and in the main room, they had all the tables. They were seating like 8 people around each table. And it's interesting. I like to sit back and just kind of look sometimes and observe and see what's happening. And you have some tables that are absolutely silent, right? And there's no eye contact. And you wonder, are these people even happy to be here? Why did they come today? But then you have other tables where they're all up, they're all focused, there's some laughter, there's the energy that you're talking about, right? And typically it's from a person, maybe 2, that got it going, right? But it was almost like this visual of like with these circle tables, here's all these little different pods. Some have zero energy velocity and momentum, but other ones are alive. And the difference is somebody said, what can I do to help this group bond? Even in the short term, over the smallest things.
Anybody that's interested in this topic, the book I recommend every time is John's everyone communicates so you connect. And it really illuminates connection. And to your point, the story that you just told, two principles in that are connectors go first. So there was someone at the other table that decided this connection was important and I'm going to be the one to get it started.
Yeah.
And then secondly, that it takes energy to connect. It's not easy. It doesn't happen by accident. You've got to organize yourself to really engage with people. But man, what a payoff when you think about like, what table did you want to be at?
Exactly. Well, and that proves that the momentum can be created, right? We can be the mass, we can create that velocity and generate the momentum. And sometimes that ringleader can walk away from the table and it continues.
Right.
Yeah. Because they're now engaged with one another. And so when we think about that in the business context, I know you try to draw things back to business in this. So thinking about our listeners today, and they obviously have relationships to drive their business. Maybe it's clients, maybe it's potential clients. What are like some of those small adjustments they can make? So, I'll just pretend it's in my business, Chip, and I'm trying to get you. We've had a relationship for 2-3 months. It seems stale, stagnant, not going anywhere. As that leader, what are one or two simple things I can do to begin to generate that momentum with you again?
Yeah, I think I'm just a big fan of constantly revisiting the intention of the work, and I think that fits into your podcast very well. But when things are stagnant, to me, what's typically happened is entrepreneurial energy is basically a vibrational field between where you are today and this tremendous vision that you have for the change that you're going to make. I mean, that is fundamentally, what energy is. And somewhere in business, we either have forces on us that kind of reduce the vibrational opportunity. In other words, we're governing we're limiting ourselves in how much we can look at that vision and embrace it. But there's often a fuzziness or lack of clarity about that intention because of all the day-to-day things that are happening. And so I'm just a big fan of, if you're not at least doing it annually, I think you can't talk about the intention of your work enough and have people reframe the work that they're doing in the context of the impact that they're making. And that's where I start almost every time. What's the vision and mission statement? What are your values? And what does it look like when you're at your most wildly successful self that will make people engage? I mean, and sometimes, to your point earlier about, the customer, it's a person, like, have things changed? It's like what I thought was important to them. Is it even important anymore? And sometimes when we're not red hot and, lighting up the scoreboard, we've fallen asleep at the wheel about what this target customer really values. And so being in that intentional field, to me, is the most important thing about breaking a malaise. I mean, you've got to revisit it and help people understand it. It has to be tangible. The storytelling and the communication about the people on the team that did it in a way that was impactful. You can't share it enough. That's where I always start. And then, I think we didn't talk about velocity, and I don't want to preempt the question, but velocity. Sometimes we think about velocity, and it's like we want to go fast. It's like that's a speed. Right. Velocity in science is a vector. So vectors, and this was a big learning with Marcus for me, and just absolutely crystallized some things that I'd seen. But to be a vector, you have to have a direction, a distance, and a speed. And I think that sometimes, when things aren't going well, we fall back into this idea of more, like, if I just had more.
Right.
And that's part of it. But, it's more like fine tuning the route that you're on to that target client, how you're going to get there and how fast, how much you're going to have, and to never lose sight of that key client. And if you're not revisiting that all the time, I mean, it's a jungle out there. I mean, it is, we use these physical terms in business because it's a violent world out there. I mean, there's competitors. There are all kinds of uncontrollable forces in the way. And if you're not charting that path all the time, I used the rocket example earlier, and I think this is a common thing that people have heard, but the fact that rockets are off course like 95% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a constant recalibration towards something that, is life or death mission that you're on. And it's the same way with our businesses. Like, who's popping up in the landscape? How do I get around them? Or do I go through them? Or what's the strategy?
Right.
So
Yep.
thinking about that, I think the energy, the intention of the work, and just that clarity about where you're going and how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
That's usually, I've just found, like, when a leader, and a business leader in particular, calls a timeout and says, look, you guys are working your tails off. Why don't we just get together and talk about what we're doing here?
Yeah.
I
It's
mean, it's almost
resetting the
always
field.
not harm. Yeah.
Yeah, everything you've been talking about, what the phrase kept popping in my mind was, is going back to the basics.
Hmm.
It's the small things that have big impact.
Right. Which
And
is why
that's where,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
like, that to me was like such a motivation in writing the Bizzics way, and even coming up with the idea of Bizzics, because you think about a world where there's 10,000 books out there.
yep,
And what is it really? I mean, it's the same thing that we find when we start our car up, or we're trying to drink our coffee and we go around a turn, and like the coffee keeps going in the same direction. I mean, it's physics. It's the
right.
basics.
Yeah,
So
it's going back to the basics and it's doing those things. And that's why we always share that everything leadership has to be intentional. That's why this is the Intentional Leader podcast. It's not going to happen by chance. And, it's interesting too. You talked about from the physics basis and the business basis, the bigger realm of energy. What is going on geopolitically is real and it impacts us.
Mhm.
I also feel like, and this is a personal feeling, but I feel like so many business leaders today are focusing on the larger geopolitical piece and thinking, I can't as a
Mm,
result of it. It's
mm.
stopping me, it's holding me back, it's where pricing is, it's where all these things are, and those are real, but it doesn't stop you from doing the small things to create your own mass, your own velocity, and your own momentum for yourself, for your colleagues, for your business, and to keep on driving. And listeners, I would challenge you, take heart to what's going around in the world. We need to be aware of it, but it is not a reason to stop doing what's right, being intentional and driving the basics so we create our own momentum.
Yeah, I think, to me, you're really talking about an abundance mindset, and
Yeah.
that's something I'm very adamant about with business owners. Is it can feel like you got nothing left. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the conference I was at yesterday, it was the keynote was Draymond John that did FUBU, and
Yeah.
he's telling his story of, they thought they were going to lose the house. They thought, and there are just resources out there. And the more, I mean, I'm not like a big cosmic kind of person, but I do believe in vibrational energy attracting the right resources. And once you shut down, again, that's a big, like, worrying about geopolitical things, Sean, to me is like, whatever vibrational field you had, it's like you've inserted this gravity field in between it that you are no
Yeah.
longer vibing on it. And
Yep.
you've got to continue to vibe to that vision and be aware of the resources that can get you there. And I just think you can't be successful in business with the scarcity mindset. I mean, it's too hard.
No.
I mean, you've got to be aware.
No. Don't
There's
create your own ceiling, create your own opportunity.
Yeah, yeah,
Be
absolutely.
intentional about it. Yeah, I love all that. Well, listeners, in the show notes today, you'll see a link where you can get a hold of the book, The Bizzics Way, and how to get a hold of Chip. But Chip, as we wrap up today, we ask the same question at the end of every episode. What is something that our listeners can do intentionally today to be a more effective leader?
Move from communicating to connecting.
Move from communicating to connecting. Make a difference
Find
in
the heart,
people's lives.
find the heart, and connect. That's it's the most important. It's the most important, especially in this technology age.
Yep.
Communication is easy. Gathering yourself to connect with another human being is a valiant, courageous act, and it has tremendous payoff. And put yourself aside and find a heart to connect to, and make that person feel great today. And I think that
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that. Well, Chip, thank you for being on the Intentional Leader podcast. It's been a joy having you here, and blessings as you keep pushing forward with the Bizzics way.
Likewise for you, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.